Welcome to a little mini-series that I like to call Character Quest. This is where I take a look at some really complex and interesting characters that don't really get talked about. That, or people just don't understand their complexity. If you've seen my video on the Defense Against the Dark Arts professors, you'll know that I am a very big Harry Potter fan. Borderline Potterhead. I love the movies, I love the books, and I dislike the author's Twitter. Sounds like I'm a qualified fan. The characters in this story are so complex that it's often said that any one of them could be the star of their own franchise. We all know the ones that get thrown around the most: Snape, Voldemort, Dumbledore, Lupin. But when I'm discussing interesting characters, there are two of them that always get brushed to the side. One of them is Horace Slughorn, but in time people are starting to appreciate him a bit more, so I didn't make this video about him. No, I decided to make it about the other character that is, while very complex and layered, never really talked about. That is Harry's first Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, Quirinus Quirrell. Most people know Quirrell as the guy from the first book that had Voldemort on the back of his head, and nothing else. To be fair, he doesn't get a huge amount of focus in the book and even less in the movies, but on Pottermore, a lot of information has been released about this guy, and guess what? It's all canon. Unlike the Cursed Child. I don't care what the author says, that never happened. But thanks to this new information, we've found that there's way more to Quirrell than meets the eye. Let me show you. First, his backstory. Quirrell was a shy, awkward boy, but very intelligent. Being a very intelligent kid, he was sorted into Ravenclaw, of course. He had immense knowledge and a lot of talent. However, anything that he could do was often overshadowed by his nerves. Whenever he was about to do something incredible, his nerves overtook him. But it didn't just affect his abilities, it also affected his social skills. He was constantly bullied at school for being an awkward mess. So because of this, Quirinus Quirrell decided that he needed to be recognized as someone great, someone powerful, someone important. He decided to take an interest in the dark arts. Not to hurt anybody really, no, he wouldn't do that. It started off as just a general interest, a curiosity really. Then it slowly turned into, I gotta show everybody just how powerful I am. They think I'm weak, but I'm really strong, and I'm really smart. This is the only way I can prove that. Still, he was able to keep his knowledge of the dark arts at bay, and he ended up taking a post at Hogwarts as the Muggle Studies professor. He did this for quite some time until he was promoted to Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, which is a bit of a step up given that this one's a core class. He decided to go off to Albania for a year in order to get some experience. After all, in order to be the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, you have to know something about defending against the dark arts. Or be Gilderoy Lockhart.
Pesky pixie pest the newbie!
But there was always a thought in Quirrell's head. He knew that even though Harry Potter was rumored to be the one that finished off Voldemort for good, there was still a piece of him out there. Something, anything, a fragment of a soul, a phantom. Somehow, the Dark Lord lived on, and he had an idea. Either be the one to finish him off for good, or be someone who learns from Lord Voldemort. He thought that if he found the Dark Lord, he would have been taught all of his secrets, and that he would have been one of the greatest wizards of all time. Again, he never really did this out of malice or spite, he just wanted to show people that he wasn't as weak as they thought. He wasn't a pushover, he wasn't an idiot. He was awkward and shy, sure, and his nerves kind of destroyed any chance he had at doing anything with social pizzazz, but he still knew what he was doing and was a very capable person. But of course, we all know Quirrell got too arrogant. These constant thoughts of I'm better than everyone thinks and I'm actually really strong got the better of him. It ended up becoming an echo chamber. It convinced him that he was strong enough to defeat the greatest dark wizard in history. He was young, he was misguided, he didn't know what he was doing. And of course, before he knew it, he ended up being defeated by Voldemort and then had to become his servant. Given the fact that Quirrell wasn't able to stand up for himself anyways, he had to bow to the Dark Lord's will and do whatever he wanted, including trying to break into Gringotts to steal the Philosopher's Stone. This didn't go very well. As a result, Voldemort decided that he needed to keep a closer eye on Quirrell, so he sealed himself to the back of Quirrell's head and forced Quirrell to wear a turban to conceal it. Clearly he was ashamed of what he's done. According to Pottermore, he would frequently try to resist Voldemort's influence and try to get him off the back of his head, but to no avail. This really stands out to me, and I'll tell you why. Again, everybody just sees Quirrell as Voldemort's throwaway minion from the first book. He's just a guy who's kind of there to help set up how evil Voldemort is and how merciless he is towards his own followers. He's often seen as some guy who's greedy and has a lot of ill will towards everybody. And yes, he did get a bit greedy, but it's clear he regretted that. The fact that he was only really serving Voldemort because he had to, and that he wasn't promised anything in return, and was constantly trying to fight him and get him off the back of his head, shows that he was never really Dark Wizard material. Someone like Bellatrix Lestrange or even Peter Pettigrew would have jumped at this opportunity. Why? Because they're wicked, wicked people. Quirrell was not. But similar to Peter Pettigrew, he wasn't serving Voldemort out of loyalty, he was doing it purely out of fear. Because let's face it, the minute he says no to Voldemort, he's gonna die. He's killed people for far less. He's killed people for being in the room when he finds out that a Horcrux is destroyed. The possession of Voldemort turned him into a Dark Wizard. He was never one on his own. Even so, he ended up meeting a Dark Wizard's end. And then after that, whenever he was mentioned, it was very rarely, and it was often in a throwaway line. Like to convince Slughorn that it's actually safe at Hogwarts because only one professor has died during his time there, that being Quirrell. Or listing off the various ways that the dark arts professors have been axed. Other than that, he doesn't really have any bearing on the series. But again, judging by the information we get from the books, that's understandable. He didn't get too much development and not enough focus to be a really big important character, but according to Pottermore, there were a lot of layers to him. Someone who's been bullied and pushed around and undermined his whole life. All he really wanted was a chance to prove himself. And he was young and naive and didn't really know what he was getting himself into. And unfortunately, he bit off more than he could chew, and ended up having to serve the rest of his life as the servant to the most notorious Dark Wizard ever. And despite all of his effort and all of his wishes to be free from this horrible, horrible influence, it was all for naught. It's not that Quirrell was too weak, it's that Voldemort was too strong. No one can resist him, let alone Quirrell. His whole life was a constant search for validation and acceptance. He was just looking for it in all the wrong places. And it's a shame we have to stop the story here, because really, that's it. Quirrell meets his bitter end and he never really did get what he wanted. Yeah, I guess that's understandable given the fact that he did end up turning to the dark arts, albeit unintentionally in some parts. But in hindsight, it would have been kinda nice to get a little bit more development with him, you know? After all, his desires are so worldly that who knows, he could have come back as a ghost. It's often said that those who come back as ghosts are ones that fear death or have a lot of worldly desires. Like Nearly Headless Nick, the thing he feared most was death. So much so that he was willing to forgo the afterlife and become a ghost and stay on Earth, despite all the disadvantages it brought. Would have been kinda cool to see Quirrell come back as a ghost and maybe talk to Harry and get a little bit more character development or something out of him. But I'd better stop here. We're getting into fanfiction territory, folks, and well, that's not really what this channel's all about. So, Quirinus Quirrell, a lonely, nervous man who wanted validation and acceptance, but couldn't really find it in the right places, ultimately leading to his untimely demise. And that, my friends, is the query of Quirinus Quirrell. So, thank you very much for watching this video, folks. What'd you guys think? Did you learn anything new? Do you feel the same way about Quirrell as I do, or do you disagree? Comment below and let me know because, let's face it, I'm always excited to hear what you guys have to say. Stay tuned. Next week is a little bit more out of this world.